So we already see the first two HTMX attributes in action and how we can use them to send a request declaratively without writing any JavaScript code, and how we can control where exactly in the element that sent the request the response content will be rendered. But what if we actually don't want to render the content in the button or instead of the button at all? What if we want to render it somewhere else, maybe below the button? Well, you can of course also configure that, because HTMX offers all those attributes here to allow you to essentially configure it in any way you need without writing JavaScript code. And the configuration and extra attribute we need here is hx-target. And by the way, the order of these attributes here is not important. I tend to start with the request attributes, hx-get and some others, which I'll show you later, but it's not important. hx-target is important here though, if we want to render the response content somewhere else and not inside or instead of this button. Because hx-target now takes a CSS selector as a value, and that selector selects any element on the page, so any element in the currently rendered DOM into which the response data will be rendered. And then hx-swap will still define if the response content will be rendered instead of the selected element, or inside of the selected element, or inside in front of existing elements, and so on. And here I want to target the entire main element and then render the response content at the end of that element. So after the existing content, after this paragraph and this button. So therefore, I now need the CSS selector for the main element. And here I can, of course, simply select that by its tag name. So I can just write main here. And this will now select the main element. By the way, if you had a target here that's matched by multiple elements, if I would, for example, select a paragraph and I had multiple paragraphs on the page, then it would target the first matching element, not all of them. But here, of course, I want to select the main element, and I only have one main element anyways, and therefore I'll target that. However, now I don't want to swap the entire element, because if I would leave it like this, and I would save that, and I would reload, you would see that clicking the Learn More button would now actually replace the entire main element with the rendered content. That might be what you want, but it's actually not what I want here. Instead, I want to render this response content inside of the main element after the existing content. Now, if we take another look at the hx-swap documentation, we can see that before end might be the setting we want here, because that will insert the response after the last child of the target element. And that's exactly what we want here. We want to persist the elements, we want to keep them, but then we want to add the response data after those elements. And therefore here it's before end that I want as a setting here. And I'll now split that across multiple lines to make it a bit easier to read, but that's just for cosmetic reasons. With that setting in place, if you save everything again and you reload, if you click the button, you see now the button and this text here is kept, but then the list is added after these elements. And that's exactly the behavior I wanted here.